Hey there, welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy what you're about to see, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means a lot. Let's jump right in. My closest friend once emptied a mop bucket into a drinking fountain instead of using the utility closet with a sink conveniently located right next to it. The following day, he was terminated from his job. One employee openly told the senior operations manager they planned to misuse a sick day as an extra vacation day. Neither I nor the manager were personally concerned, but it was the equivalent of admitting time-off fraud to HR. A truly foolish move. This same person joined the company the same day I did, but made a scene when I was promoted, accusing our supervisors of sexism. The irony. Promotions were granted automatically upon completing required certification exams, which I had done, and she had not. It was the most routine promotion imaginable, yet she turned it into a major issue. She ended up resigning a few months later. Someone dumped several newly sharpened knives into a sink filled with soapy water without alerting anyone. Another coworker reached into the water to start cleaning and ended up with 5 deep cuts on his hand. A tattoo artist I worked with once inked "Laugh Now, Cry Later" across a client's chest. He was eventually fired. A few years later, another customer came in with "Warrior" tattooed in bold letters across his upper back, asking to have it corrected. It turned out to be the same tattooist. About 10 years ago, a coworker opened a Skype chat during a group call and began badmouthing another participant. The problem? He forgot he was sharing his screen with everyone in the meeting. One individual used a vape pen in a clean room area containing an acid hood with butanol, nitric acid, and hydrofluoric acid. Unsurprisingly, his employment didn't last long after that incident. At the conclusion of what was supposed to be a 4-week research phase, an employee admitted they hadn't spoken to any business stakeholders and had instead fabricated the details. That afternoon, as a manager escorted her out of the building, they discovered her at the printer with a pile of confidential documents. A worker held a piece of wood in his hand and attempted to cut through it with a skill saw. He adjusted the blade depth so it wouldn't reach his hand, but miscalculated. The blade hit his hand, and though it didn't cut all the way through, he still required stitches and a trip to the hospital. While I was stationed in a small equipment storage shed at a construction site, one of the workers walked over carrying 2 full jerry cans and smoking a cigarette. Even the site's infamous fool stepped in to ask, "What is wrong with you?" A colleague distributed a spreadsheet ranking every woman in the office. They were graded on categories like breasts, butt, legs, attractiveness, and sense of humor, with scores ranging from 1 to 5. Somehow, he seemed genuinely surprised when he didn't pass his probation period. I've got a story for you. Back when I worked in corrections, I was tasked with training a new recruit. This was before our job had any formal training processes. Still don't know why that took so long. Anyway, my shift supervisor asked me how the guy was doing, and I honestly told him that I didn't think he'd make it. It wasn't for any specific reason, just a gut feeling. Since I couldn't explain it clearly, the supervisor approved his training. About 2 months later, the guy was working in the recreation yard with other correctional officers. One of them was a woman with a noticeably large chest that she liked to stick out. With mosquitoes flying everywhere, the COs started slapping them off each other for fun. Well, this guy noticed a mosquito on the woman's chest, and instead of waving it away, he slapped it with an open hand and left his hand there for a full second before pulling it back. She filed a complaint, and he was fired the very next day. But that's not the end. A couple of years later, my brother, a retired firefighter, shared stories about a relatively new guy in his department. He said the guy was friendly and hardworking, but completely lacked initiative and critical thinking skills. For example, during a house fire that was fully engulfed in flames, everyone was busy unrolling hoses and setting up tools like axes and pikes, while this guy just stood there watching the fire. My brother, who was a captain at the time, told him to grab the big fan from the truck, the one used to push oxygen out of the house. It's a heavy piece of equipment with wheels and a telescoping handle, like luggage. The guy got the fan down from the truck, set it on the ground, and went back to staring at the fire. My brother had to tell him to take it to the front door. The guy looked at the fan, clearly confused, until my brother walked over, extended the handle, and showed him how to use it. The guy responded with an, "Oh, okay." Then, as if that wasn't enough, he put the axe he'd been holding the whole time in a grassy ditch, leaned the fan forward, and started dragging it down the road without using the wheels. This tore up both the fan's casing and the pavement. Someone eventually pointed out the wheels, and the guy was completely amazed by how they worked. As my brother shared these stories, he never mentioned the guy's name until once when I connected the dots. I described the person, and it turned out to be the same guy, the one from the boob slap incident. When I told my brother that story, he just nodded and said, "Yeah, that checks out." While verifying that the proper lockout-tagout procedure had been followed, I assured an employee it was safe to change the dies on a horizontal press. Despite my assurance, he was skeptical and, without informing anyone, slid a piece of tooling steel roughly the size of a coffee can beneath the die base as a precaution. You can probably guess where this is going. He completed the tooling change, forgot about the steel, and cycled the press. What followed was the sound of a $400,000 machine destroying itself, a noise so dramatic it could take Stephen King 4 pages to describe. I'm a nurse, and one time my certified and licensed medication aide accidentally gave a patient 10 times the prescribed dose of a pain medication. She had mixed up the dosage with that of another medication and didn't realize her mistake for 6 hours. The patient, a frail, 90-pound elderly woman, was miraculously unaffected because her organs were already shutting down and couldn't metabolize the drug. She ended up needing 12 doses of Narcan to counteract it. Astonishingly, she remained alive, alert, and chatty throughout the entire ordeal, with no lasting effects from what was essentially an overdose. At an old warehouse job on his very first day, a new hire offered the general manager a sip of Hennessy from the cup he was drinking out of. I've never seen anyone get fired faster. We had a high-voltage kVA transformer installed in the warehouse, and I specifically told the electricians to position it high enough so it wouldn't get hit by a forklift. A few hours later, one of my managers, who wasn't trained or authorized to operate the forklift, decided to use a sit-down model to move some freight. As luck would have it, he sped past my office with the forks raised high. Sure enough, he punctured the transformer, creating a massive electrical display. He even bent one of the forged blades, something I'd never seen before. The incident knocked out power to our building and the entire surrounding area. Fortunately, he wasn't hurt, but I fired him on the spot. Quite the memory. Someone colored the background of a Word document blue because they wanted blue paper. The actual blue paper had been sitting next to the printer for months. This person printed daily. I worked with hazardous chemicals, and one of my coworkers was notorious for constantly using his phone. We had to use a pump to transfer a dangerous chemical into a tank, but it required one person to pump and another to monitor the flow. I specifically told him to stay off his phone just this once. Despite that, he ignored me, and the tank overflowed, spilling the chemical everywhere. It took hours to clean up the mess. In high school, I worked at a Chinese restaurant, taking orders and clearing tables. Another guy from my school, who was nice but lacked common sense, got hired. During his first 2 weeks, he decided to cook some food for himself, which we were allowed to do within limits. He dropped wontons into the fryer, and when he thought they were done, he reached into the boiling oil with his bare hand to grab them. We were chatting at the time, and it took a moment for both of us to react. Then he quickly yanked his hand out, shouting, "Yeesh," like in a cartoon. He went to the hospital and quit shortly after.